So in the second talk of the Local Wildlife Sites Virtual Symposium, we're going to go over to Jon Cranfield from Herpetologic Ltd, and he's going to talk to us about a case study from Essex, a local wildlife sites case study from Essex. I'm not going to say anything more about that, Jon, because I don't want to ruin the story. So over to you, and look forward to hearing this.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's actually, this is a case of like a reactive designation many decades ago now, not that many, but so the picture I've got here is this is the development that actually destroyed a county wildlife site, and this is the habitat that was created, part of the habitat that was created as part of the mitigation for the development. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I'm just trying to make sure I've got the right to click through. So I rising from the ashes. So, you know, people do designate local wildlife sites, and I know how it feels when you've got, you know, your favorite spot and it gets destroyed by the land use changes or development. And of course, this is part of the talk in my introduction. So people that don't know me, I'm Jon Cranfield. I'm a very small company called Herpetologic Ltd. I'm a specialist consultant, specialising in amphibians and reptiles. You can see some of the pictures there of me. This is at Neverden with a female adder. In fact, it's a family affair, really. This is my dad who introduced me to wildlife, and of course, this is my eldest son and my youngest son. They're very much involved with surveys and things. I'm also a member of ARG UK. I'm a founder member of the Essex and Reptile Group back in 2002, and I was part of it in the 90s. And local wildlife sites were part of some of the activities of ARGs to look for important amphibian and reptile sites. And I'm now a member of Hampshire Isle of Wight Amphibian Reptile Group, and I'm the recorder. And I have been involved in at least locally in my local town. I've managed to have a site important for nature conservation designated at my local churchyard. And you can see a few years back, these are my boys looking under a tin in a churchyard for slow worms. There's an incredibly dense number of slow worms, and that led to part of the churchyard becoming a county wildlife site for slow worms and chalk grassland. So unfortunately, I'm going to be talking about the fate of a local wildlife site in Essex. It's known as Burnt Meals, and I believe they're known as local wildlife sites in Essex. Previous to that, they were county wildlife sites, sort of like in the noughties, and they've been adopted as LAWs, basically. Essentially, the mitigation that was carried out in the development was primarily led with protected species, but also habitat mitigation. And I do think that the status of the site as a local wildlife site influenced what happened. So I'm going to focus on some of the species that have been found since the development, and also how a new local wildlife site was proposed, and it's been proposed and adopted in Basildon. And then I'm going to have a quick look at the future, really, with biodiversity net gain and district level licenses, which is the DLL there, which is administered by Natural England in Essex. So this is a sort of timeline of the local wildlife site, Burnt Meals. Around about 2005, it was designated primarily for its amphibians, and the habitats that were found there, and in what was termed important invertebrate assemblages. At the time, great crested newts were surveyed in 2005, around that sort of time, and it was seen to have an important population of great crested newts, and that was part of the designation. In 2009, it was revised, the criteria was revised around great crested newts, because in Essex, great crested newts are quite widespread, and the criteria for crested newts to be considered as part of local wildlife sites was incredibly increased to quite significant populations. I first surveyed the site in 2002, probably my first or second year of being a sole trader as an ecological consultant. And then I didn't come back to the site until 2009-2010, where we carried out a newt mitigation, reptile mitigation, and a habitat translocation in that time. And that led to the destruction of Burnt Mills County Wildlife Site. So since then, you can see some of the species on the, this is one of the orchids that has arrived on the new site. We have located harvest mice in the common reeds that's in the new washlands. And also we've got quite a number of ponds with some interesting invertebrates that are arriving each year. 11 years on, I was really keen to try and get the site designated as a local wildlife site, because obviously we destroyed BA44, and of course when you destroy something you lose it forever. So you know, you can't recreate that habitat perhaps, but I was really keen to see if we can get you know, 10 years or 11 years after the establishment of the nature reserve to become a new local wildlife site for Basildon. So this is way back in 1999. Hopefully you can see my cursor. This area here was what was designated as the county wildlife site. There's a little bit extra here. So you can see that it's an isolated pocket. You've got industrial areas here. You have a minor road, which is Courtauld Road, and then you've got the A127. And essentially this came up for development, and there's two ponds here. I think it's one about here and one here. And what it is a washland which was created quite some time ago, probably in the 60s or the 70s. It was all dug out, and there's two ponds that were left, which is really quite bizarre. They were actually like raised ponds, and the idea is there's a brook that runs through here, and it goes off up here towards Wickford, and of course the flood water comes in and it is held here to avoid flooding Wickford, basically. So this is way back in 1999, and so this area here is where the proposed mitigation and compensation was proposed for the development. The development was an incinerator. It became a waste transfer development, and so they bring black bin waste into this development, and of course the washland had to be created, and the protected species obviously had to have measures put in to compensate for that, but also the local wildlife site was also a big factor, because people like bug life and that were objecting. There are species that were here that were quite important. So this is Burnt Mills. So this is what it looked like in 2009, 2010. You can see there's a newt fence here that encircled one of the newt ponds. You can see it's really quite overgrown. You can see some of the willows and things. So in this area here was the pond, and you can see a traffic cone there. That's the pond level, and it came down into the washland. And so the neighbouring campsite, so the travelling community, used to graze quite heavily across the site, which actually helped with the diversity of the botanical diversity and also the invertebrates. So it's very parched. It's you know, quite a dry part of the country. You can see that there's some banks here, which is where the reptiles and the newts used to overwinter. So that's one of the reasons why it became a county wildlife site, because the invertebrate surveys found significant invertebrate assemblages, and also two particular important species, which I'll go on to in a bit. So the original designation, sorry for the lots of text. So this is the revision of the designation. You can see the map here that's highlighted, and you can see that it's not all county. This area here wasn't part of the county wildlife site, and there's various species that are found, red bartsia and things like that. And I thought it was quite a nice idea to see whether the mitigation enabled some of these species to persist north of the A127. And you can see that in an invertebrate survey in 2007 found, which is shrill carder and brown carder within the Burnt Mills area. So that's probably one of the reasons why it became designated, and it was revised pretty quickly because it was coming up for development. Obviously, lots of people are objecting, and it's unfortunate that it's considered a brownfield site. You can see it's a post-industrial site, and of course they're targeted for development. And you've got the selection criteria down here: open mosaic habitat on previous developed land. The species criteria there are, I think, one is the bumblebees, and then the other one, interestingly, was palmate newt, which is an interesting observation because we didn't find any palmate newts when we moved the animals. So this is what Burnt Mills looked like in 2010 after we'd translocated 2,000 great crested newts, roughly 2,000 smooth newts, 1,500 slow worms. But we also found harvest mice. We had stacks of logs which had stag beetle larvae in them. They all went over, including the actual habitat itself. And we started out taking turfs, so the biodiverse parts of the site that was determined by the ecologists. We cut the turf, put them on a low loader and took them to the new washlands. And then eventually we were scraping up the remaining habitat, the turfs, with a digger. And we put them in the back of a lorry and moved them over to the new washlands. So this is an old photo of, you know, the habitat being delivered to the new washlands, which was, you know, a lorry around the A127, the A132. And you can see here, actually, this is the turf. It's like a forklift, so they were lifting turfs off the backs of lorries and things. You can see that there's a tree here that was relocated that unfortunately died, but some did take. A lot of habitat was taken over to create extensive habitats north of the A127. So this is a picture of the washlands in 2011. You can see the turfs that are being established. This is an 8-hectare washland. It holds probably in the region of 80,000 cubic meters of water, perhaps. This is the central channel, which is the overflow of the Neverden Brook, and it floods out here, and during flood conditions, holding the water back to make sure that Wickford doesn't get flooded. Generally speaking, the habitat here was translocated to try and provide breeding habitats for breeding birds, so things like reed buntings and stuff. I think it was Kevin Morgan was really keen to get rushes and bulrushes and things over here, and we found we relocated it in 2010, and in 2011 birds were dropping in here breeding. Likewise, we had wintering birds as well, so like several hundred snipe. They were counted south of the A127, and of course this was moved over and they dropped in the winter the following year. So it's not scientific, but it gives weight to the idea that we could move habitat perhaps. So this is 2011. You can see the county wildlife site here was completely infilled with clay, which was hard, it was brought from here, and also constructing this area. A lot of the clay was taken. Some of it was as a conveyor belt under the A127 and brought into here, but eventually this washland was connected to the Neverden Brook. You can see that the channel going through here, and it discharges into the Neverden Brook and flows off this way. So eventually they had to drive around this direction, come in through here, and put the habitat into this area here. This is the newts release area, so you can see a number of black blodges. They're the new ponds that were created as part of the newt mitigation. And this is in 2020, and you can see the development building here. I think it was 2021 that this area was a candidate for possibly having habitats of that could become another BA 44 local wildlife site. This is the extent of our land that we manage. We have a management contract with the site owners, which is now Aviva. We work with Aviva, and we've got a contract to manage this site for up until 2040. This area of land is leased for 99 years and it's covered under a section 106. So I'm a herpetologist, I'm a newt conservationist. I like to dig ponds and things. And I was also very keen to see whether we can get this site designated as a local wildlife site. There's just more aerial sort of drone pictures of the site, different types of habitat. This is the footpath that goes through the washlands. The water flows underneath. This is a public footpath, but our neighbours have blocked it off at one end, so unfortunately people can't come on, but people are welcome to come and visit the site. We are open to local wildlife sites, local wildlife organisations, so Wickford Wildlife Society, the Essex Field Club, Essex Amphibian Reptile Group, etc. We have regular meetings carrying out surveys for amphibians and reptiles. But also we have other taxa that we're going out and look for. One interesting note is we have a couple of blotches here of sea buckthorn, which is unusual in this part of Essex. Don't know how that arrived, but that's expanding and providing a slightly different habitat that you would normally expect in this area, perhaps. And this is 2022, last year. This is standing on the washland bank, looking out over the washland in this direction. This is the development building that was on the previous slide, and it goes beyond this area, a whole variety of different habitats, which we are managing. We've had mechanical cutting, but we're also using grazing, which I'll explain a bit more later on. And of course, some of the species on site, great crested newts. The surveys in 2005, they found 50 to, I think it's 50 or 80 adult newts. In 2018, we had 225 adult newts. We're going to be carrying out another 3-year survey from next year because the criteria for SSSI selection is peak counts of over 100 for 3 years. It's the selection criteria was increased because in Essex they're very widespread, and obviously they do have they did have some significant protections. So generally speaking, that at the time they felt that great crested newts, you could designate hundreds and hundreds of newt sites. So they are picking out the real important newt sites, the ones that are producing the most newts. And you can see that we've carried out eDNA surveys of the ponds. The replicate scores, no surprise, is 12 out of 12. We do egg searches, we use funnel traps, and we also have training sessions for Essex Amphibian Reptile Group and other groups to learn how to carry out newt surveys, identifying the species, etc., for licenses. So you can see, even from the MBN, you can see that it's quite a widespread species. This is probably where Neverton is situated. Of course, we've got hundreds and hundreds of newts, and basically we just need to carry on providing habitat for them. And the way we do that is to create more ponds when we can. And we have created 18 ponds now, so it's quite an increase in ponds in the area, which is good for newts and other species. I think looking back at historic maps, because the 2 ponds at the county wildlife site were probably been there for over 100 years, and a lot of the ponds around the area have been lost, and it's in the region of maybe losing 20 or so ponds in the same area, and we've managed to increase the numbers of ponds, which is a good thing for biodiversity. So these are some of the ponds, the original ponds that were created, and what we've got in here is suitable habitats and vegetation for an invertebrate species that's colonized the site, and that's the great silver water beetle, which is a reasonably uncommon species. I know people do get excited when you see them. This was found last September in a ponds dipping, netting survey in one of the ponds around the reserve. I really love them. I think they're absolutely amazing animals. We've got ivy leaf duckweed here, which is the sort of like the food plants for them. We've got lots of snails as well, but we haven't managed to find the larvae, so we're not sure whether they're breeding on site or not. But it is a good example of a significant species coming into the site. And you can see that from the NBN records, you can see it's relatively much more scarce than great crested newts. There doesn't appear to be any records around Wickford, but we're going to be putting them into the Essex Field Club to update their database. Now, during the translocation, we had a number of ecologists and who were also botanists, and there was one particular guy who spotted a plant or a number of plants in the old ponds, and he was very keen to relocate them as well. In fact, we were relocating all sorts of things to get the to recover the different species, and finally water dropwort. He spotted that in the two ponds that were on the county wildlife site, and he was carefully translocating the plants into the edges of the new ponds, and also the existing ponds that had been created in 2006. And this year we've went onto site this July, and you can see an absolute profusion of water dropwort flowers. And I believe Joshua Stiles, when I sent this to them, I think it was OMG was the message I got back, and I was really pleased that I confirmed it was the fine leaf water dropwort. This is pond 6, absolutely festooned in it, and this is pond 1, which is the oldest pond. You can see the flowers all the way around the edges, and I believe that, researching this, I'm not a botanist, but I believe it's an indicator species or an axiophyte, perhaps on a rare plant register. It's definitely uncommon in this part of the UK, and so it sort of indicates a more important, an important habitat. And so when you're looking back at historic maps, those ponds, like I said before, were over 100 years old. Perhaps you can see the ponds on the historic maps of 1900s and 1920. So perhaps that's an indication of how important those ponds were. And it's quite pleasing that we've managed to save that species and relocate it to ponds that are now 13, maybe 15 years old. So we're on that sort of on that route to getting towards 100-year-old ponds, perhaps. Quite some way. I won't be around. The 99-year lease, so the ponds will still be there in that time. We'll be working on site to 2040, and I think this year we've managed to get the management around the ponds reasonably well, and they've responded really nicely. And this is the BSBI sort of distribution map, and the NBN is lacking records, perhaps. We're down this area here, and when I found it, I was quite excited. This is a pond 5, and you can see numbers upon a few plants arising in other ponds. And what we're hoping with the new ponds that we've created is that this species may colonize those, because we have grazing animals that do walk in and around the ponds, and we're hoping that the species will be able to colonize the new ponds. So this is the designation or the citation for Neverden washland, BA55. You can see some species that have survived arose on the habitats. It's it says that it's what does it say? A recently created naturally vegetated flood alleviation lagoon, but with associated ponds, grassland, and scrub habitats. Of course, great crested newts is possibly the largest newt colony that I know of in the district, if not possibly the county. Its peak counts are 225 in 2018, so we're expecting to have similar counts next year and the years following that. And the way to maintain newts is to dig more ponds, and I think we've got quite a bit of space to put ponds in. We have taken opportunities with the district level license to create new ponds. This is an established pond, pond free. We have willow, emerald, damsel flies in here, and various other invertebrates that we would like to find out more about, living on the pondweed and stuff like that. And it's just doing really well. And so we've got fine leaf water dropwort and great crested newts and the diving beetle. Not sure whether we have the shrill carder or brown carder bee, but we're still going to look out for those. It was always said that the mitigation probably wouldn't work, or we would need 10, 15 years to see if the habitat's being created, whether it actually does work for these species. The one concern was that they won't be able to get over the A127 into this site, because there are some habitats left down here. You can see the potential Laos 44 here. There may still be populations of bees and things there. So we're hopeful that we've got the food plants and things for the species, and in the future we hope that they will turn up. But definitely the great silver water beetles turned up, and we've got a significant population of great crested newts, probably in the region of 4,000 strong now. I think every pond, most ponds that we've dug have got signs of newts in them, which is good news. So with the selection criteria, so the rationale, so it's recent origin, no single habitat or substantial quality, but it is a diverse mosaic. Species of significance, so mosaic criteria, the great crested newts. We do have management issues, so not receiving enough management pressure. So back then, we have managed to have an agreement with our neighbour to graze horses onto the site. It is in favourable and stable condition, and of course, priority habitats is ponds. And this is my dad pointing out some of the yellow rattle that we've introduced to some of the grassland to try and curb the vigour of the grass. There's lots and lots of plants here, which is being spread around the different grasslands to try and create diverse sward, different heights and things, which seems to be working, encouraging orchids and things like that. And I think if it's go back here, so you can see this is in flower in June. Lots and lots of yellow rattle. You can see an orchid appearing there. We've got common spotted, green-winged orchid, and this year we've had bee orchids turn up on the flood banks. And this was last week or so. The yellow rattle is spreading its seeds, and we bring the horses in over the autumn and winter to poach the ponds, and also to knock back the vegetation and knock the yellow rattle around. We also do cut it. We use cutting to control the goat's rue. I think this year is the goat's rue problem is significantly reduced, possibly because we really did graze it hard, and we have lots of scrubby areas where reptiles and invertebrates can shelter within, to hopefully keep the diversity going for the future. And of course, I'm very much keen on ponds and great crested newts. This quote here was from John T. Denton, because we're forever debating what we should do about newts. Should we translocate them, etc. And of course, we all know how to look after newts, build ponds and create woodland, and are going to continue that into the future on Neverden. And hopefully in the future, we may be able to extend the reserve to the north potentially, and yeah, we'll just keep maintaining the habitats, and thinking about removing fences and planting more hedgerows, and just making it more wilder, as it were, with the boundary fences to keep the livestock in, perhaps, because it's a busy road, and that's what we're going to continue doing into the future. And of course, my sons are going to hopefully be involved this summer. They're going to come out and help over the school holidays. They're very keen to help with the surveys and also photography. They're very much, my eldest is very keen at wildlife photography. So it's all going to be good in the future. And that's the end. I don't know what time we've got.